The millionaire only hired him because he was starving, but this quiet boy had a secret in his backpack worth millions. Welcome back, and enjoy what might be the best story you'll watch today. The scorching Chicago sun beat down mercilessly on the cracked asphalt of South Michigan Avenue, where a skeletal figure of a boy pressed his face against the ornate iron gates of the Whitmore estate. His ribs showed through the tattered fabric of what had once been a white shirt, now stained with dirt and desperation. The boy's bare feet, cut and bleeding from walking on broken glass and rough concrete, trembled as he gripped the cold metal bars. His stomach hadn't known the comfort of a full meal in 4 days, and the gnawing emptiness had become a constant companion. Through the gates, he could see the sprawling mansion beyond a testament to wealth that seemed as distant as the moon. But it wasn't the opulence that held his attention. It was the sight of the animals in the distance, horses grazing peacefully, their coats gleaming with health and care. And there, separated from the others by a smaller fence, stood a lone bull, old, weathered, with patches of mange visible even from this distance. The other animals avoided it, just as people avoided the boy himself. The sound of approaching footsteps on gravel made him jerk his head up. A security guard in a crisp uniform was walking toward the gate, his face set in a scowl that the boy had seen countless times before. "Get away from here, you little vagrant," the guard spat, his hand moving to the radio clipped to his belt. "This is private property. We don't want your kind around here." The boy's dark eyes, sunken deep in their sockets, met the guard's gaze for just a moment before he stumbled backward, his weak legs barely supporting his weight. He had learned not to argue, not to plead. Words were luxuries he couldn't afford, and they rarely changed anything anyway. The wealthy didn't see him as human. He was just another piece of urban debris to be swept away. As he turned to leave, his knees buckled without warning. The world tilted sideways, and the hot pavement rushed up to meet his face. His vision blurred, spots dancing before his eyes like dying stars. The last thing he saw before consciousness slipped away was a pair of expensive leather shoes approaching, and a voice different from the guard's, gentler somehow, saying, "What's happened here?" When awareness returned, the boy found himself lying on something soft. His eyes fluttered open to reveal an unfamiliar ceiling painted in warm cream tones. The scent of fresh bread filled his nostrils, making his stomach clench with renewed hunger. He tried to sit up, panic flooding through him as he realized he was inside the very mansion he'd been staring at through the gates. "Easy there, son." The voice belonged to a man in his 60s, with silver hair and kind eyes that seemed to see more than they should. He wore simple clothes, khaki pants, and a button-down shirt, nothing that screamed wealth, despite the grandeur of his surroundings. "You're safe. You fainted from hunger right outside my gate." The boy's throat felt like sandpaper, but he managed to croak out, I wasn't trying to steal anything, sir. I was just looking." A gentle smile crossed the older man's weathered features. "I know you weren't. My name's Benjamin Whitmore. Most folks around here call me Mr. Ben. What's your name?" The question hung in the air like a challenge the boy couldn't meet. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. The truth was, he'd been so many names to so many people: boy, kid, vagrant, scrap, pest, that his real name had gotten lost somewhere along the way. It had been years since anyone had asked him that question with genuine interest. I don't remember," he whispered, the admission burning like acid in his throat. Mr. Ben's expression didn't change, didn't show the disgust or pity the boy expected. Instead, he simply nodded. "Well then, until you remember, how about we call you Sam? It's a good, strong name." The boy Sam felt something crack inside his chest. When was the last time someone had given him a name instead of an insult? When had anyone treated him like he was worth something more than the dirt on their shoes? "Are you hungry, Sam?" Mr. Ben asked, and the question was so loaded with genuine concern that Sam could only nod, not trusting his voice. "Good. Let's get some food in you and then we'll talk." The kitchen was enormous, with granite countertops and stainless steel appliances that gleamed like mirrors. But what struck Sam most was the warmth of it, not just the physical warmth from the ovens, but something deeper. This was a place where people cared for one another, where love was measured in home-cooked meals and gentle words. Mrs. Rodriguez, the housekeeper, was a round woman with kind eyes and quick hands. She placed a plate in front of Sam that seemed to contain more food than he'd seen in weeks: scrambled eggs, toast, bacon, fresh fruit. His hands shook as he picked up the fork, and he had to force himself to eat slowly, even though every instinct screamed at him to devour everything as quickly as possible. "When did you last eat?" Mr. Ben asked, settling into the chair across from him with a cup of coffee. 4 days ago," Sam admitted between careful bites. "Found some bread behind a bakery." The older man's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but his voice remained gentle. "Where do you live, son?" "Wherever I can find a place to sleep. Under bridges, mostly. Sometimes in doorways when it's really cold." "Family?" The word hit Sam like a physical blow. He set down his fork, his appetite momentarily forgotten. "My mama died when I was 8. Cancer. My daddy, he left after that. Said he couldn't handle it." His voice grew smaller with each word. "I've been on my own for 5 years now." Mr. Ben leaned forward, his eyes intense. 5 years? You're only 13. Sam nodded, unable to meet the man's gaze. He knew what was coming next, the questions about why he hadn't gone to child services, why he hadn't asked for help, why he'd chosen the streets over the system. But Mr. Ben surprised him. "That's a long time to be taking care of yourself," he said simply. "You must be pretty strong to have survived all that." The unexpected kindness nearly undid Sam completely. His throat tightened, and he had to blink rapidly to keep the tears at bay. No one had ever called him strong before. Most people saw him as weak, as a failure, as something to be pitied or scorned. "I saw you looking at the animals," Mr. Ben continued. "You seem particularly interested in Old Blue." "Old Blue? The bull?" "He's been with us for years, but he's getting on in age. The other animals don't much care for him anymore. He's got some health problems, and frankly, most of my workers think he's more trouble than he's worth." Sam's heart clenched. He knew exactly how Old Blue felt: unwanted, discarded, seen as nothing but a burden. He is lonely. Animals can feel rejection just like people can. Mr. Ben studied Sam's face carefully. "You know, I could use some help around here. Nothing too strenuous: feeding the animals, cleaning out stalls, general maintenance. The work's honest, and it comes with 3 meals a day and a place to sleep. You interested?" Sam's head shot up so quickly he nearly gave himself whiplash. You'd let me work here? Really? Really? But I need to know you're committed. This isn't a handout, it's a job. You'd be expected to work hard, show up on time, and treat the animals with respect. Can you do that?" "Yes, sir," Sam said, his voice stronger than it had been in years. "I won't let you down." The staff quarters were modest but clean: a small room with a bed, a dresser, and a window that looked out over the pastures. Sam sat on the edge of the bed, still hardly believing his luck. After 5 years of sleeping on concrete and cardboard, the mattress felt like a cloud beneath him. That night, he lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the estate settling around him. In the distance, he could hear the gentle lowing of cattle and the occasional whinny of a horse. For the first time in as long as he could remember, he felt safe. But sleep wouldn't come. His mind kept returning to the conversation with Mr. Ben, to the kindness in the older man's eyes, to the incredible opportunity he'd been given. It felt too good to be true, like a dream that would evaporate with the morning sun. Rising quietly, Sam slipped out of his room and made his way toward the pastures. The night air was cool against his skin, and the stars above seemed brighter than they had in years. He walked until he reached the fence where Old Blue stood alone, his massive head hanging low. "Hey there, boy," Sam whispered, approaching slowly. "I know how you feel. Nobody wants us around, do they?" The bull lifted his head, and in the moonlight, Sam could see the intelligence in his eyes, the deep sadness that seemed to mirror his own. Without hesitation, Sam climbed over the fence and sat down in the grass beside the enormous animal. "I'm Sam," he said softly. "I guess we're both lucky Mr. Ben saw something in us that nobody else did." Old Blue lowered his head until it was nearly touching Sam's shoulder, and for a moment, boy and bull sat together in the quiet night, Two outcasts who had finally found a place where they belong. The next morning brought Sam's first real day of work. Mrs. Rodriguez had left clean clothes outside his door, jeans and a work shirt that actually fit. He dressed quickly and made his way to the kitchen, where she pressed a thermos of coffee and a bag lunch into his hands. "You eat good today," she said in her accented English. "Mr. Ben, he don't like his workers to be hungry." The other workers were already gathered near the barn when Sam arrived. They were a mix of ages and backgrounds, but they all had one thing in common: they looked at Sam with suspicion and barely concealed hostility. "So you're the new charity case," said Jake, a burly man with graying hair and calloused hands. "Hope you don't expect special treatment just because the boss feels sorry for you." "I don't expect anything except the chance to work," Sam replied quietly, keeping his voice steady despite the knot of anxiety in his stomach. "We'll see about that," Jake muttered. "Most of your type don't last a week." The work was harder than anything Sam had done before. He mucked out stalls, hauled feed, repaired fencing, and scrubbed water troughs until his hands were raw and his back ached. But he didn't complain. He couldn't afford to. This job was his lifeline, his chance at a real future, and he'd rather die than give it up. During his lunch break, he found himself drawn once again to Old Blue's enclosure. The bull was lying in the shade of a large oak tree, his breathing labored, and his eyes cloudy with pain. "He's dying," said a voice behind him. Sam turned to see Dr. Patricia Hendricks, the estate's veterinarian, approaching with her medical bag. She was a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and gentle hands. "Cancer, we think. Maybe 6 months left if he's lucky." "Isn't there anything you can do?" Sam asked, his heart breaking for the lonely animal. "Not much. We can keep him comfortable. But Mr. Ben refuses to put him down. Says every creature deserves to live out its natural life with dignity." She paused, studying Sam's face. "You seem to have taken a shine to him." "He reminds me of myself," Sam said honestly. "Nobody wants him around, but he keeps going anyway." Dr. Hendricks smiled. "You know, I could use some help with the animal's medical care. Nothing complicated, just basic monitoring, giving medications, keeping records. You interested?" Sam's eyes widened. "You trust me with that?" "Mr. Ben told me you're a quick learner. Besides, Old Blue seems to calm down when you're around. That's worth something." As the weeks passed, Sam settled into a routine that gave his life structure and purpose for the first time in years. He woke before dawn, fed the animals, cleaned their enclosures, and spent his evenings learning about veterinary care from Dr. Hendricks. The other workers gradually warmed to him as they saw his dedication and work ethic. But it was his relationship with Old Blue that truly transformed him. Every spare moment Sam spent with the aging bull, talking to him, grooming him, and simply being present for an animal that had been forgotten by everyone else. In return, Old Blue seemed to gain strength from Sam's companionship, his eyes brightening whenever the boy approached. The transformation wasn't just in Old Blue. Sam was filling out, his hollow cheeks rounding as regular meals did their work. His hair, now clean and regularly cut, revealed itself to be a rich brown color. But the most dramatic change was in his eyes. They no longer held the haunted look of a boy who expected only cruelty from the world. 3 months into his employment, Sam made a discovery that would change everything. He was cleaning out Old Blue's stall when he noticed something odd about the bull's behavior. The animal kept pawing at a particular spot in the dirt, as if trying to dig something up. Curious, Sam knelt down and began to carefully excavate the area. What he found made his breath catch in his throat. Buried beneath the surface was a small metal box, tarnished with age, but still intact. Inside the box, wrapped in oiled cloth, was a collection of papers covered in symbols and diagrams that seemed to dance before Sam's eyes. His heart began to race as he recognized the mathematical notations, the engineering principles, the complex calculations that had been burned into his memory years ago. These weren't just any papers. They were his papers, the designs he'd created as a child, the revolutionary irrigation system he'd developed in secret during those long, lonely nights before his mother's death. He'd buried them here years ago, during one of his desperate attempts to find shelter, never imagining that fate would bring him back to this exact spot. Sam's hands trembled as he carefully examined each page. The designs were still there, still viable, still revolutionary. His mother's voice echoed in his memory. "One day, someone will see what you're hiding." She'd been right, but she'd never lived to see that day. The sound of footsteps made him quickly rewrap the papers and slip them into his jacket. He'd need time to think, to plan, to figure out what to do with this incredible second chance. But one thing was certain: his life was about to change again, and this time he'd be ready for it. Mr. Ben had given him a chance when no one else would. Now, Sam had the opportunity to not just repay that kindness, but to multiply it 1,000-fold. The secret he'd carried for so long was about to become the key to changing not just his own life, but the lives of countless others who, like him, had been written off as worthless. As he returned to his work, Sam couldn't help but smile. Old Blue watched him with those intelligent eyes, and Sam could swear the bull understood that something momentous had just occurred. The boy who had once been nobody was about to become somebody, not for himself, but for every forgotten child who deserved a chance at a better life. The revolution was about to begin, and it would start with an act of kindness that had saved a starving boy's life. Sometimes the smallest gestures create the biggest changes, and Sam was living proof that everyone deserves a second chance to show the world what they're truly worth. The other workers might still call him charity case behind his back, but Sam no longer cared. He knew who he was, and more importantly, he knew what he was capable of. The real question was, what would he do with the power he'd just reclaimed? But that question would have to wait. For now, he had animals to feed, work to do, and a bull to comfort. The future could wait. The present. Sam had learned that sometimes the best way to change the world is to start by changing yourself. The first chapter of his new life was ending, but the second was about to begin with a revelation that would shake the very foundations of everything he thought he knew about himself and his place in the world. The boy who had collapsed from hunger at the gates of a mansion was about to discover that his greatest strength had been with him all along. Who would have thought that salvation could come from the most unexpected places? Mr. Ben had saved Sam's life, but Sam was about to save so much more. The question was, would he have the courage to seize this opportunity, or would fear and doubt hold him back from his destiny? The answer would come soon enough, but for now, Sam simply focused on the work at hand, unaware that his life was about to change in ways he never could have imagined. The secret was out of the ground, and with it came the power to transform not just his own future, but the future of every child who had ever been forgotten by the world. Hope was a dangerous thing, but it was also the most powerful force in the universe. And Sam was about to learn just how dangerous and powerful it could be when wielded by someone who had nothing left to lose and everything to gain. As the sun set over the Whitmore estate, casting long shadows across the pastures, Sam stood beside Old Blue and whispered a promise that would echo through the years to come. "We're going to change everything, old friend. We're going to make sure no one else has to suffer like we did." The revolution had begun, and its first soldier was a 13-year-old boy who had learned that the greatest strength comes not from what you have, but from what you're willing to give away. The world was about to discover what happens when you give someone like Sam a second chance, and the results would be nothing short of miraculous. What seemed like the end of one story was actually the beginning of another. And Sam was about to prove that sometimes the most powerful force in the world is a child who refuses to give up on tomorrow, no matter how dark today might seem. The secret was out, the stage was set, and the real adventure was just beginning. In a world that had forgotten how to see the extraordinary in the ordinary, Sam was about to remind everyone that miracles come in the most unexpected packages, and sometimes they're delivered by the very people society has written off as worthless. The boy who had been nobody was about to become somebody, and the world would never be the same. But first, he had to figure out how to use his gift without losing himself in the process. The greatest challenge wasn't creating the design, it was deciding what to do with the power it would bring. And that decision would define not just Sam's future, but the future of everyone whose life he was about to touch. The question was, would he choose to become the person the world expected him to be? Or would he choose to become the person he was meant to be? Only time would tell. But one thing was certain: the boy who had collapsed from hunger at the gates of a mansion was about to discover that his greatest strength had been with him all along, buried beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to change everything. The moment had arrived, and Sam was ready to embrace his destiny. The only question was the world ready for what he was about to unleash? The following weeks passed in a blur of careful planning and growing anxiety. Sam carried the weight of his secret like a physical burden, the folded papers hidden beneath his mattress feeling heavier with each passing day. He'd examined them countless times, marveling at the complexity of the irrigation system he'd designed as a child. The mathematical calculations were flawless, the engineering principles sound, and the potential applications limitless. Yet doubt gnawed at him constantly. What if he was wrong? What if the designs weren't as revolutionary as he remembered? What if he was just a desperate boy clinging to false hope? During the day, he threw himself into his work with renewed intensity, as if physical labor could silence the chaos in his mind. The other workers noticed the change in him, the way his hands sometimes trembled when he thought no one was looking, the distracted expression that would cross his face at odd moments. "You all right, kid?" Jake asked one afternoon as they repaired a section of fence together. The older man's initial hostility had gradually softened into something resembling respect, and Sam had come to value his opinion. "Just thinking about things," Sam replied, tightening a wire with more force than necessary. "Dangerous habit, thinking too much," Jake said with a gruff laugh. "Tends to complicate things that ought to be simple." If only Jake knew how complicated things had become. Sam nodded and forced a smile, but his mind was elsewhere, wrestling with the implications of what he'd discovered. The irrigation system could revolutionize agriculture in drought-stricken areas, provide clean water to communities that desperately needed it, and potentially save millions of lives. But it could also make him wealthy beyond imagination, and wealth, he'd learned, changed people in ways that weren't always good. His evening visits with Old Blue became his sanctuary, the only time when the chaos in his head quieted to a manageable whisper. The bull's condition was deteriorating steadily, his breathing more labored each day, but his eyes still brightened when Sam approached. "What would you do, old friend?" Sam whispered one night, stroking the bull's weathered hide. "If you had something that could change everything, but you weren't sure you were strong enough to handle it?" Old Blue huffed softly, as if he understood the weight of the question, and gently nudged Sam's shoulder with his massive head. In that simple gesture, Sam found a moment of peace. Dr. Hendricks had been teaching him more advanced veterinary techniques, and Sam discovered he had a natural aptitude for the work. His hands were steady when administering medications. His observations about the animal's behavior were consistently accurate, and he had an intuitive understanding of their needs that impressed even the seasoned veterinarian. "You have a gift," she told him one evening as they finished treating a horse with a minor injury. "Have you ever thought about veterinary school?" The question hit Sam like a lightning bolt. Education, real education, had been nothing but a distant dream for so long that he'd stopped allowing himself to even think about it. I don't have the money for something like that," he said quietly. "There are scholarships, programs for students with exceptional circumstances. Your background might actually work in your favor. Colleges love stories of students overcoming adversity." She paused, studying his face. "I could make some calls, get you information about programs that might be interested in someone with your unique perspective." Sam's throat tightened with emotion. "You'd do that for me?" "Of course. Talent like yours shouldn't be wasted." She smiled warmly. "Besides, Mr. Ben specifically asked me to look out for opportunities for you. He sees something special in you, Sam." That night, Sam lay awake again, but this time, his sleeplessness was fueled by possibility rather than anxiety. Two paths stretched before him. He could pursue veterinary school and build a respectable, meaningful career helping animals, or he could reveal his designs and potentially change the world on a much larger scale. Both options seemed surreal after years of simply struggling to survive from one day to the next. The decision was complicated further by his growing attachment to the Whitmore estate and everyone on it. This place had become home in a way nowhere else ever had. Mr. Ben treated him like the son he'd never had. Mrs. Rodriguez fussed over him like a mother, and even the other workers had accepted him as one of their own. The thought of leaving, of disrupting this carefully constructed new life, filled him with dread. But fate it seemed, had other plans. It was a Thursday morning in early autumn when everything changed. Sam was mucking out Old Blue's stall when he heard raised voices coming from the direction of the main house. Through the barn window, he could see several men in expensive suits standing on the front porch, their body language aggressive and demanding. Mr. Ben stood facing them, his usually calm demeanor showing cracks of strain. Sam couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable. These men were not bringing good news. After several minutes of heated discussion, the suited men climbed into their black sedans and drove away, leaving Mr. Ben standing alone on the porch. His shoulders sagged with defeat. That evening, Mr. Ben called all the workers together for an unprecedented meeting. They gathered in the main barn, their faces reflecting the confusion and concern that Sam felt churning in his own stomach. Mr. Ben looked older than Sam had ever seen him, the weight of whatever news he carried etched deeply in the lines around his eyes. "I won't sugarcoat this," Mr. Ben began, his voice heavy with emotion. "The estate is in financial trouble. Has been for some time, actually. I've been fighting it, trying to find solutions, but today I received word that the bank is calling in my loans. I have 60 days to pay what I owe, or they'll foreclose on everything." The silence that followed was deafening. Sam felt the blood drain from his face as the implications sank in. Lose the estate? But this was home. This was where he belonged. This was where Old Blue lived out his final days in peace and dignity. "How much?" Jake asked quietly. "How much do you owe?" Mr. Ben's laugh was bitter and hollow. "More than I can possibly raise in 60 days. I've already mortgaged everything I own, liquidated most of my investments. The economic downturn hit my portfolio hard, and I made some poor business decisions trying to recover the losses." "What about selling some of the land?" suggested Maria, one of the younger workers. "The market's too soft right now, and I'd never get enough to make a difference." Mr. Ben looked around at the faces of his employees, people who had become family. "I'm sorry. I know this affects all of you, and I wish there was another way." Sam's mind raced as he processed the information. 60 days. 2 months to save not just his own future, but the futures of everyone who worked here. 2 months to preserve the only real home he'd ever known. 2 months to ensure that Old Blue could live out his remaining time in peace. The meeting broke up shortly after, the workers dispersing to their quarters with heavy hearts and uncertain futures. Sam remained behind, approaching Mr. Ben as the older man prepared to leave. "Sir," Sam said quietly, "is there really no other option? No way to raise the money?" Mr. Ben placed a gentle hand on Sam's shoulder. "I appreciate your concern, son, but this isn't your burden to carry. You're young, talented, you'll land on your feet. Dr. Hendricks has been telling me about the veterinary programs she's researched for you. Maybe this is the push you need to pursue that dream." But Sam barely heard the words about veterinary school. His mind was fixed on a single terrifying possibility, a chance to save everything and everyone he cared about, but at the cost of revealing the secret he'd guarded so carefully. That night, he pulled the designs from their hiding place and spread them across his small desk. In the lamplight, the diagrams seemed to pulse with potential energy, as if they were alive and waiting for their moment to change the world. His mother's words echoed in his memory. "One day, someone will see what you're hiding." Maybe that someone was meant to be Mr. Ben. Sam spent the next 3 days in agonizing deliberation. He researched patent law on the estate's computer, trying to understand the process of bringing an invention to market. He calculated potential values, estimated development costs, and tried to figure out if his designs were really worth enough to save the estate. The more he researched, the more convinced he became that his irrigation system could indeed be revolutionary. Similar, less efficient systems were already generating millions in revenue for their inventors. His design was superior, in every way more efficient, less expensive to build, and adaptable to a wide range of environments. But revealing the designs would mean revealing his past, his mother's death, his father's abandonment, and the years he'd spent on the streets. It would mean admitting that he'd been hiding something significant from the people who had shown him nothing but kindness and trust. What if they felt betrayed? What if they questioned his motives for keeping such a massive secret? What if they decided he wasn't the person they thought he was? The internal debate raged until Friday afternoon, when Sam made his regular visit to Old Blue's enclosure. The bull was lying beneath his favorite tree, his breathing so labored that each breath seemed like it might be his last. When he saw Sam approaching, Old Blue made a tremendous effort to lift his head, his eyes still bright with affection despite his obvious pain. "Hey there, old friend," Sam whispered, settling down beside the massive animal. "You're not feeling so good today, are you?" Old Blue lowered his head until it rested against Sam's leg, a gesture of trust and companionship that never failed to move the boy. They sat together in comfortable silence for several minutes before Sam began to speak. "I need to tell you something," he said softly. "I found something that might be able to save this place, but I'm scared. What if I'm wrong? What if I mess everything up? What if trying to help makes things worse?" Old Blue's breathing hitched, and for a moment Sam thought the bull was struggling for air. But then he realized that the sound was different, softer, almost like a sigh, as if Old Blue understood the weight of the decision Sam was facing and was offering what comfort he could. "You know what it's like to be different, don't you?" Sam continued. "To have something inside you that others might not understand or appreciate. But you never stopped being yourself, even when the other animals rejected you, even when people said you were worthless." The bull's eyes seemed to bore into Sam's soul, and in that moment the boy felt a clarity that had been eluding him for days. Old Blue had never hidden what he was: sick, old, unwanted. But he had faced each day with dignity and courage. He had accepted kindness when it was offered and given love in return, never pretending to be something he wasn't. Maybe that was the answer. Maybe the real question wasn't whether Sam was brave enough to reveal his secret, but whether he was brave enough to trust the people who had already accepted him for who he appeared to be. "You're right," Sam whispered, stroking Old Blue's neck. "It's time to stop hiding." That evening, Sam knocked on the door of Mr. Ben's study. The older man looked up from a pile of financial documents, his face drawn with stress and exhaustion. "Sam, what can I do for you?" "Actually, sir, I think there's something I can do for you." Sam's voice trembled slightly, but his resolve was firm. "There's something I need to show you. Something I should have shown you a long time ago." Mr. Ben gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Sit down, son. You look like you've seen a ghost." Sam sat and carefully withdrew the folded papers from his jacket pocket. His hands shook as he unfolded them and placed them on the desk between himself and Mr. Ben. "These are mine," he said simply. "I designed them when I was 9 years old, before my mother died. I buried them here years ago, during one of my attempts to find shelter. I found them again 3 months ago, in Old Blue's enclosure." Mr. Ben leaned forward, studying the complex diagrams with growing amazement. Even without an engineering background, he could see the sophistication of the design, the careful attention to detail, the revolutionary approach to a problem that affected millions of people worldwide. "Sam," he said slowly, "do you understand what this is? What this could mean?" "I think so," Sam replied. "It's an irrigation system that could change everything. And if I'm right about its value, it might be enough to save the estate." The silence that followed seemed to stretch for eternity. Mr. Ben continued to examine the papers, occasionally looking up at Sam with an expression of wonder and disbelief. Finally, he sat back in his chair and shook his head. "Sam, this is extraordinary. But I have to ask, why now? Why are you showing me this now, when the estate is in trouble? Did you know about our financial situation before tonight?" The question Sam had been dreading. He took a deep breath and met Mr. Ben's eyes directly. "No, sir. I found out about the money problems the same time everyone else did. I've been carrying these designs around for months, trying to figure out what to do with them. I was scared that if I revealed them, everything would change. Scared that you might think I had ulterior motives for being here. And what changed your mind?" Sam thought about Old Blue, about the courage the old bull had shown in simply being himself despite rejection and pain. "I realized that hiding who I am was dishonoring the kindness you've shown me. You gave me a chance when no one else would, and I repaid that trust by keeping secrets. That's not the person I want to be." Mr. Ben studied Sam's face for a long moment, then broke into a slow smile. "Son, if these designs are worth what I think they might be, you could have sold them to anyone. You could have walked away from here a wealthy young man and never looked back. Instead, You chose to trust an old man who took you in when you were starving. That tells me everything I need to know about your character." The relief that washed over Sam was so intense, it left him dizzy. "So you're not angry that I kept them secret? Angry, Sam? You were protecting something precious, something your mother helped create with you. Of course you were cautious about revealing it, but the fact that you're willing to share it now, to use it to help others, that's what makes you special." Mr. Ben gathered up the papers carefully. "We'll need to have these evaluated by experts, get proper patents filed, find the right investors. This is going to change your life in ways you can't imagine." "Our lives," Sam corrected quietly. "I want to do this together, as partners. You gave me a home when I had nowhere else to go. Now let me help give you the means to keep that home." The older man's eyes misted with emotion. "Partners it is then. But Sam, you need to understand, once this gets out, once people realize what you've created, everything will be different. There will be attention, pressure, people who want to use you or manipulate. Are you prepared for that?" Sam thought about the years he'd spent invisible and forgotten, about the hunger and cold and loneliness that had been his constant companions. "I think I can handle being noticed," he said with a smile. "The question is, are you ready to be partners with a 13-year-old genius?" Mr. Ben laughed, the first genuine laugh Sam had heard from him in days. "Son, I've been ready for that since the day you collapsed outside my gate. I just didn't know it yet." As they shook hands across the desk, Sam felt the last piece of his old life falling away. The frightened, nameless boy who had survived on the streets was gone, replaced by someone with purpose, with potential, with the power to change not just his own future, but the future of countless others. But the real test was yet to come. Having the designs was one thing, bringing them to market, navigating the complex world of patents and investors and corporate interests, was another challenge entirely. And Sam was about to learn that having a secret worth millions was nothing compared to having a secret that everyone wanted to steal. The revolution he dreamed of was about to begin. But revolutions, he would soon discover, were messy, dangerous things that didn't always go according to plan. The boy who had once been nobody was about to find out what it really meant to be somebody, and whether he was strong enough to handle the consequences of his own success. What happens when a child who has nothing suddenly has everything? What happens when the forgotten become unforgettable? Sam was about to find out, and the answers would test every lesson he'd learned about trust, loyalty, and the true meaning of family. The designs were out in the open now, and there was no going back. The only way forward was through whatever challenges lay ahead, armed with nothing but his intelligence, his integrity, and the support of the people who had believed in him when no one else would. It would have to be enough, because failure was no longer an option. Too many people were counting on him now, and Sam had never been one to let people down. The question was, would the world be ready for what he was about to unleash, or would his gift become a curse that destroyed everything he'd worked so hard to build? But those were questions for tomorrow. Tonight, he had promises to keep to Mr. Ben, to Old Blue, to his mother's memory, and most importantly, to himself. The boy who had buried his dreams was about to dig them up and plant them in soil rich enough to grow miracles. The real adventure was just beginning, and Sam was ready to embrace whatever came next. After all, he'd already survived the worst life could throw at him. How hard could success possibly be? He was about to find out that sometimes getting everything you ever wanted was the most dangerous thing that could happen to you. But for now, he was content to sit with his partner and plan a future that would honor both his mother's memory and Mr. Ben's faith in him. The designs that had once been buried in the dirt were about to bloom into something beautiful, and Sam intended to make sure that when they did, everyone who had ever been forgotten by the world would have a chance to share in the harvest. What could be more revolutionary than that? The next morning brought a flurry of activity unlike anything the Whitmore estate had ever seen. Mr. Ben had spent most of the night making phone calls, reaching out to contacts in the engineering and investment communities. By dawn, he had arranged meetings with 3 different patent attorneys, 2 agricultural engineers, and a venture capitalist who specialized in revolutionary technology. Sam felt overwhelmed by the sudden acceleration of events. Just 24 hours ago, his biggest concern had been whether Old Blue was eating enough. Now he was preparing to meet with people who could potentially change the course of his entire life. The weight of possibility pressed down on him like a physical force. "Remember," Mr. Ben said as they drove toward downtown Chicago for their first meeting, "these people are going to try to determine not just the value of your invention, but whether you're mature enough to handle what comes next. Be yourself. That's the person who created these designs in the first place." The patent attorney's office was located in a gleaming skyscraper that made Sam feel dizzy just looking up at it. Margaret Chin was a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s, who examined Sam's designs with the intensity of a jeweler appraising diamonds. For nearly 2 hours, she asked detailed questions about the engineering principles, the mathematical calculations, and the potential applications. "This is remarkable," she finally said, setting down her magnifying glass. "The efficiency ratings alone put this system decades ahead of current technology. The cost-effectiveness is extraordinary, and the scalability." She shook her head in amazement. "Son, do you understand that this could revolutionize agriculture in developing nations?" Sam's throat felt dry as dust. "I hoped it might help people who don't have access to clean water." "Help them? This could save millions of lives." Margaret turned to Mr. Ben. "Getting the patents filed will take some time, but I can tell you right now that this technology is worth conservatively $50 million on the open market, probably more." The number hit Sam like a physical blow. $50 million! He'd spent years scrounging for enough money to buy a sandwich, and now he was sitting in a lawyer's office being told his childhood invention was worth more money than most people saw in 10 lifetimes. "Are you all right?" Mr. Ben asked gently, noticing Sam's pale complexion. I never imagined." Sam struggled to find words. "What do we do now?" Margaret smiled. "Now we protect your intellectual property and start the process of bringing this technology to market. But first, I need to ask you something important. Are you absolutely certain you want to proceed with this? Once we file these patents, your life will never be the same. There will be media attention, corporate interest, and unfortunately, people who will try to take advantage of you." Sam thought about the estate, about the 60-day deadline, about Old Blue growing weaker each day. "I'm certain," he said firmly. "But I want Mr. Ben as my partner in everything. Whatever money this makes, we split equally." "Sam!" Mr. Ben protested. "This is your invention. You don't owe me anything." "You're wrong," Sam said quietly. "I owe you everything. Without you, these designs would still be buried in the dirt, and I'd probably be dead on the street somewhere. We're partners, or we don't do this at all." Margaret's expression softened. "That's quite a generous gesture, young man. Are you sure you've thought this through?" "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." The meeting with the agricultural engineer was equally overwhelming. Dr. James Morrison was a specialist in irrigation technology, who had worked with 8 organizations around the world. When he saw Sam's designs, his reaction was even more dramatic than Margaret's had been. "This is impossible," he said at first, studying the calculations with a frown. "The efficiency ratings you're claiming, they violate everything we know about water flow dynamics." "Check the math," Sam said quietly. Dr. Morrison spent the next hour doing exactly that, working through Sam's calculations on a whiteboard while muttering to himself. When he finally turned around, his face was pale with excitement. "The math is correct," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Dear God, the math is actually correct. Do you realize what this means? We could irrigate the entire Sahel region for a fraction of what it costs with current technology. We could bring agriculture to areas that have been barren for centuries." The enthusiasm in the engineer's voice was infectious, and Sam felt a surge of pride that had nothing to do with money. This was what his mother had dreamed of, using his gift to help people who had nowhere else to turn. "How long would it take to build a prototype?" Mr. Ben asked. 6 months, maybe less if we rush it. "But we need significant funding for materials and testing." Dr. Morrison paused, studying Sam with new respect. "Son, how old did you say you were when you designed this?" 9, Sam replied. 9 years old. Dr. Morrison shook his head in amazement. "I've been working in this field for 30 years. And I couldn't have conceived of anything this elegant. You're not just smart, you're a once-in-a-generation genius." The words should have felt good, but instead they made Sam uncomfortable. He'd never thought of himself as a genius, just a kid who was good with numbers and liked to solve problems. The idea that he was somehow special, somehow different from everyone else, felt like a burden rather than a gift. The meeting with the venture capitalist was the most intense of all. Richard Blackwood was a man in his 40s who wore expensive suits and spoke in terms of market penetration and profit margins. His office was decorated with photographs of himself shaking hands with famous politicians and business leaders. "I'll be frank with you," Blackwood said after examining the designs. "This technology is worth a fortune. Conservative estimates put the global market potential at over $1 billion annually. But bringing it to market will require significant investment. We're talking about building manufacturing facilities, establishing distribution networks, navigating international regulations." "How much investment?" Mr. Ben asked. "Initial development and market launch? Probably $50 to $60 million. Sam's heart sank. Even if his patents were worth $50 million, they wouldn't have enough to both save the estate and bring the technology to market. But Blackwood wasn't finished. "However, I'm prepared to offer you a deal. My firm will provide all the necessary funding in exchange for a 60% stake in the company. You'd retain 40% ownership and full creative control over the technology." "That seems," Mr. Ben began, but Blackwood cut him off. "There's more. I'm prepared to offer an immediate advance of $20 million against future profits. That money would be yours to use however you see fit, paying off debts, personal expenses, whatever. $20 million. More than enough to save the estate and provide financial security for everyone who worked there." But something in Blackwood's manner made Sam uneasy. The man's smile was too quick, his enthusiasm too practiced. "I need time to think about this," Sam said. Blackwood's expression hardened slightly. "I understand this is a big decision, but I should warn you that opportunities like this don't come along often. There are other investors who would kill for a chance at technology this revolutionary. If you wait too long to decide, you might find that my offer is no longer on the table." The implied threat hung in the air like smoke. Sam felt a chill run down his spine as he recognized the tone. It was the same predatory quality he'd heard in the voices of adults who had tried to take advantage of him on the streets. "We'll get back to you," Mr. Ben said firmly, standing up and extending his hand. "Thank you for your time." As they left Blackwood's office, Sam could feel the man's eyes boring into his back. There was something hungry about that gaze. Something that made him want to run back to the safety of the estate as quickly as possible. "What did you think?" Mr. Ben asked as they waited for the elevator. "I didn't like him," Sam said honestly. "He reminded me of people I used to hide from when I was living on the streets. People who smile at you while they're planning to hurt you." Mr. Ben nodded approvingly. "Trust your instincts. A man's character shows through, no matter how expensive his suit is. We'll find other investors, people who want to help rather than exploit." But finding those people proved more difficult than either of them had anticipated. Over the next 2 weeks, they met with a parade of investors, each one offering variations on the same theme: significant money in exchange for majority control of Sam's invention. Some were more subtle than Blackwood, others more aggressive, but all of them shared the same fundamental flaw. They saw Sam as a means to an end, rather than a partner in a shared vision. The pressure was mounting in other ways as well. Word had begun to leak out about the Wonder Boy who had created revolutionary irrigation technology. Reporters started calling, asking for interviews and photographs. Several major corporations reached out directly, offering to buy the patents outright for sums that made Sam's head spin. But the most difficult pressure came from within the estate itself. As the 60-day deadline approached, some of the workers began to question Sam's reluctance to accept the most lucrative offers. "Look, kid," Jake said one evening as they finished the day's work, "I appreciate that you want to help save this place. But if you've got a chance to make $50 million, maybe you should take it. The rest of us can find other jobs." "It's not about the money," Sam tried to explain. "It's about making sure the technology gets used the right way to help people who really need it." "That's easy to say when you're sitting on a gold mine," Maria added, her tone sharper than usual. "But some of us have families to feed. We can't afford to wait around while you figure out how to save the world." The criticism stung because Sam knew it was partially justified. He was holding up decisions that affected other people's livelihoods, and his idealism might cost them their jobs. But every time he considered accepting one of the offers that would solve their immediate problems, he thought about his mother's words about using his gifts to help others. The conflict came to a head one afternoon when Sam was visiting Old Blue. The bull's condition had deteriorated significantly over the past weeks, and Dr. Hendricks had quietly told Sam that the end was near. As he sat beside his friend, stroking the animal's neck and trying to offer what comfort he could, he heard footsteps approaching. It was Blackwood, accompanied by two men in dark suits, who looked more like bodyguards than business associates. The venture capitalist's smile was as practiced as ever, but there was an edge to it that hadn't been there before. "Sam," Blackwood said smoothly, "I thought I might find you here. Beautiful animal, it's a shame he's so sick." Something cold settled in Sam's stomach. "How did you get onto the property? Your security isn't as tight as it should be, but that's not why I'm here." Blackwood moved closer, and Sam instinctively stood up, placing himself between the man and Old Blue. "I'm here because I've been thinking about our conversation, and I realize I may not have made my position clear." "Your position was perfectly clear," Sam said, his voice steady despite the fear building inside him. "I don't think it was. You see, Sam, I've invested considerable time and resources in researching your technology. I've already begun preliminary discussions with manufacturing partners, started the process of identifying target markets. I've made commitments based on the assumption that we would be working together." "I never agreed to anything." Blackwood's smile widened, but it never reached his eyes. "That's true. But you need to understand that backing out now would cause me significant financial losses, and I'm not the kind of man who absorbs losses gracefully." The threat was unmistakable now, and Sam felt his mouth go dry. "Are you threatening me?" "I'm explaining reality." "You're a smart boy. Surely you understand that powerful people don't like being disappointed." Blackwood gestured to his companions. "These gentlemen have helped me resolve similar disappointments in the past." Sam's mind raced, trying to figure out how to get out of this situation without escalating it further. But before he could speak, a new voice cut through the tension. "I think you gentlemen are lost." Jake emerged from behind the barn, carrying a pitchfork in one hand and a shotgun in the other. His face was set in an expression Sam had never seen before: cold, dangerous, and utterly without fear. "This is a private conversation," one of Blackwood's men said, his hand moving toward his jacket. "On private property," Jake replied calmly. "And you weren't invited." He raised the shotgun slightly, not quite pointing it at anyone but making his intentions clear. "I suggest you leave, now." For a moment, the tableau held 5 people frozen in a standoff that could turn violent with the slightest provocation. Then Blackwood laughed, a sound devoid of any real humor. "This isn't over, Sam," he said, turning to leave. "You can't hide behind farmhands forever. Eventually, you'll have to make a choice: work with me, or face the consequences of disappointing me." As the 3 men walked away, Sam felt his knees buckle with relief. Jake lowered the shotgun and moved to Sam's side, his expression concerned. "You all right, kid?" "Yeah, I think so. Thank you. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't shown up." Jake's expression was grim. "I've got a pretty good idea. Men like that don't make idle threats." He studied Sam's face carefully. "What exactly have you gotten yourself into?" Sam told him everything about the designs, the meetings with investors, the pressure to sign deals that would give up control of his invention. Jake listened without interruption, his expression growing more troubled with each detail. "So let me get this straight," Jake said when Sam finished. "You've got something worth millions of dollars, but every person who wants to buy it also wants to own you. And now one of them is threatening you because you won't play along. That's about the size of it." Jake was quiet for a long moment, stroking Old Blue's neck as he thought. "You know what your problem is, kid? You're thinking like this is just about you. But it's not. It's about all of us. The people who work here, the people who could benefit from your invention, even this old bull. You're carrying a responsibility that's bigger than any one person should have to handle. So what do? You stop trying to handle it alone." Jake's expression was serious but kind. Was serious but kind. "Mr. Ben's a good man, but he's not equipped to deal with people like Blackwood. You need help, real help, from people who know how to fight back against bullies with money and lawyers. That evening, Sam found himself in Mr. Ben's study once again. But this time the atmosphere was very different. The older man was furious when Sam told him about Blackwood's visit, and for the first time since Sam had known him, Mr. Ben's calm facade cracked completely. "That son of a bitch threatened you on my property?" Mr. Ben's voice was tight with controlled rage. "We're calling the police right now." "And tell them what?" "He never actually said he was going to hurt me. It was all implications and suggestions." "Then we'll hire security, get bodyguards, whatever it takes to keep you safe." Sam shook his head. "That's not a solution, that's just hiding. Besides, we can't afford security. We can barely afford to keep the estate running for another month." Mr. Ben sank into his chair, suddenly looking every one of his 60-plus years. "I'm sorry, Sam. I should have protected you better. I should have seen this coming. You couldn't have known. But Jake was right about one thing: I can't handle this alone anymore. We need help from people who understand how to deal with situations like this." "What kind of help?" Sam had been thinking about this all afternoon, and he'd come to a conclusion that both excited and terrified him. "I want to take this public. Not just the invention, the whole story. Who I am, where I came from, what the technology could mean for people who need it. If we do it right, we can control the narrative instead of letting people like Blackwood control us." Mr. Ben frowned. "That's a risky strategy. Once your story is out there, you'll never have privacy again, and there will be people who try to exploit your background, turn you into some kind of poster child for whatever cause they're pushing. But there will also be people who understand what we're trying to do, who want to help for the right reasons. And if my story inspires other kids who are going through what I went through," Sam's voice grew stronger with conviction, "that might be worth the risk." "You're sure about this?" Sam thought about Old Blue, growing weaker each day, but still fighting to live with dignity. He thought about his mother, who had believed in using gifts to help others. He thought about the children around the world who were going to bed hungry tonight, who might have clean water and food if his invention could reach them. "I'm sure. But I want to do it on our terms. Tell our story our way. Do you know any journalists who might be interested?" Mr. Ben smiled for the first time all day. "As a matter of fact, I do. Sarah Mitchell at the Chicago Tribune. She's done some excellent pieces on social issues, and she's got a reputation for integrity. Want me to give her a call?" As Mr. Ben reached for the phone, Sam felt a familiar mixture of fear and anticipation. He was about to step into a spotlight that would change everything. But this time, he wasn't facing the unknown alone. He had partners, friends, people who believed in him and what he was trying to accomplish. The boy who had once been invisible was about to become the most visible person in America. The question was, would fame help him achieve his goals, or would it destroy everything he'd worked so hard to build? But the narrative hook that Sam couldn't escape was this. In a world where money talks loudest, could the voice of one formerly homeless teenager be heard above the roar of corporate greed? And if it could, would anyone be listening when it mattered most? There was only one way to find out, and Sam was about to discover that sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is tell the truth. But it was also, he was beginning to suspect, the most powerful thing as well. The revolution was about to go public, and Sam was ready to face whatever came next. After all, he'd already survived the worst the world could throw at him. How much harder could it be to survive success? He was about to find out that fame was a double-edged sword that could cut both ways, and that sometimes the people who claimed to want to help you were the ones you needed to fear the most. But those were lessons for another day. Tonight he had a story to tell, and he intended to tell it right. The world was about to meet Sam, and Sam was about to learn what it really meant to have the power to change everything. The only question was, would he be strong enough to handle what came next? The phone was ringing, and Sarah Mitchell was about to answer. The story that would change everything was about to begin, and there was no going back now. What happens when the forgotten become unforgettable? Sam was about to find out, and the answer would either save him or destroy him. But one thing was certain, it was going to be one hell of a ride. The real test was just beginning, and Sam had never been more ready for anything in his life. The boy who had nothing was about to discover what it really meant to have everything, and whether he was strong enough to handle the responsibility that came with it. The revolution would be televised, and Sam intended to make sure it was worth watching. After all, the world needed heroes. And sometimes heroes came from the most unexpected places, like a homeless boy with a dream and the courage to make it come true, no matter what the cost. The first prototype of Sam's irrigation system was completed on a gray November morning, just as the last leaves were falling from the oak trees around the estate. The device itself was surprisingly modest, a collection of pipes, sensors, and control mechanisms that could fit in the back of a pickup truck. But Sam knew that within this humble assembly lay the potential to transform millions of lives. Dr. Morrison had led the engineering team that brought Sam's childhood designs into reality, working 18-hour days for 3 months to meet their aggressive timeline. The prototype incorporated improvements that Sam hadn't even imagined at age 9: solar power cells for remote operation, smartphone connectivity for monitoring, and modular components that could be adapted to different terrains and water sources. "It's beautiful," Sam said, running his hands over the smooth metal surfaces. "Mama would have loved to see this." The testing facility had been constructed on a remote section of the Whitmore estate, away from the main buildings and the occasional media attention that still followed Sam's story. Here, they could simulate different soil conditions, water pressures, and climate variables to ensure the system would work reliably in the field. But as impressive as the prototype was, Sam's attention was increasingly drawn to Old Blue's declining condition. The bull spent most of his time lying beneath his favorite oak tree now, his breathing shallow and labored. Dr. Hendricks had privately told Sam that it was likely a matter of days, not weeks. "I want him to see the first successful test," Sam told Dr. Hendricks one evening as they checked on the animal together. "He's been part of this journey from the beginning. He deserves to know that we made it work." Dr. Hendricks smiled sadly. "Animals understand more than we give them credit for. He knows you've accomplished something important. He can see it in your face, hear it in your voice." The next morning brought the moment Sam had been preparing for since that day he'd first buried his designs. The prototype was connected to a test plot that simulated the challenging conditions of a Guatemalan mountain village: rocky soil, limited water pressure, irregular terrain. If the system could work here, it could work anywhere. Sam stood beside the control panel, his finger hovering over the activation switch. Around him, Dr. Morrison's engineering team watched with barely contained excitement. Video cameras were recording every moment for the thousands of crowdfunding supporters who had made this possible. But Sam's eyes were fixed on Old Blue, who lay beneath his tree, just within sight of the testing area. The bull's head was raised, his intelligent eyes focused on Sam as if he understood the significance of this moment. "This is for Maria Santos," Sam said quietly, "and for every child who shouldn't have to walk hours for clean water. This is for my mother, who taught me that knowledge without compassion is worthless. And this is for you, Old Blue, because you showed me that everyone deserves dignity, no matter what the world thinks they're worth." He pressed the switch. The system hummed to life with a quiet efficiency that belied its revolutionary nature. Water began flowing through the network of pipes, guided by sensors that automatically adjusted pressure and distribution based on soil conditions and plant needs. Within minutes, the test plot was receiving precisely the amount of water each section required. No waste, no excess, just perfect optimization. "Water pressure is stable across all zones," called out one of the engineers. "Soil moisture sensors are responding correctly," reported another. "Power consumption is 60% below projected levels," added Dr. Morrison, his voice filled with amazement. But Sam wasn't listening to the technical reports. He was watching Old Blue, who had somehow found the strength to lift his massive head and look directly at the irrigation system in operation. For just a moment, the bull's eyes seemed to hold the same bright intelligence they'd shown when Sam first met him. "You see that, old friend?" Sam whispered. "We did it. We actually did it." As if responding to Sam's words, Old Blue lowered his head back to the ground and released a soft, contented sigh. The sound seemed to carry years of patient waiting, of quiet faith that this moment would eventually come. The test continued for 12 hours, with the system performing flawlessly under every condition the engineers could devise. By evening, Sam was confident that they had created something truly revolutionary, not just technically superior, but economically viable for the communities that needed it most. That night, Sam sat with Old Blue under the stars, stroking the bull's neck and sharing the details of the day's success. The animal's breathing was even more labored than usual, but his eyes remained alert and focused on Sam's face. "I got a message from Maria's teacher today," Sam said softly. "They've selected their village for the first field installation. In 3 months, Maria won't have to walk 2 hours for water anymore. She'll be able to go to school every day, play with her friends, just be a kid." Old Blue made a soft rumbling sound deep in his throat, and Sam chose to interpret it as approval. "I want you to know that none of this would have happened without you," Sam continued, his voice thick with emotion. "You taught me about dignity, about not giving up even when everyone else has written you off. You showed me that worth isn't determined by what others think of you, but by how you treat the people who can't protect themselves." The bull's breathing became more peaceful as Sam spoke, as if the words themselves were providing comfort. "I promise I'll remember everything you taught me. When the money starts rolling in, when people try to convince me that I'm special or important, I'll remember sitting here with you and understanding that the only thing that really matters is using whatever gifts we have to help others." As dawn broke over the estate, Sam woke to find himself still sitting beside Old Blue, who had passed away peacefully during the night. The bull's expression was serene, almost smile-like, as if he had known that his part in Sam's journey was complete. Dr. Hendricks found them there an hour later, and quietly helped Sam understand what everyone who had known Old Blue already recognized. The bull had been waiting for this moment, waiting to see Sam's dream become reality before letting go. "But he knew," Dr. Hendricks said gently, as they prepared Old Blue for burial. "Animals have a sense about these things. He held on until he was certain you were going to be okay." The funeral was small but meaningful. Sam, Mr. Reed, Ben, Dr. Hendricks, and all the estate workers gathered beneath the oak tree where Old Blue had spent his final months. Sam spoke about friendship, loyalty, and the profound impact that one being can have on another's life. On another's life. Old Blue taught me that strength isn't about being the biggest or the strongest," Sam said, his voice carrying clearly in the morning air. "It's about enduring with grace, showing kindness, even when the world is cruel to you, and never giving up on tomorrow, even when today seems hopeless." They buried Old Blue beside the oak tree with a simple marker that read, "Friend to the Forgotten." Sam planted a small sapling nearby, something that would grow into a lasting memorial to the bull who had helped save his life in ways that couldn't be measured. 2 weeks later, Sam received a phone call that would have been the culmination of any normal teenager's dreams. A major technology corporation was offering to purchase his irrigation patents for $200 million, with additional royalties that could eventually total more than $1 billion. "It's an extraordinary offer," Margaret Chen said during the conference call. "You'd be financially secure for life, able to pursue any dream you wanted." But Sam's response surprised everyone on the call. "I'm not interested," he said simply. "Sam," Mr. Ben said gently, "this is a life-changing amount of money. You could fund college, graduate school, research projects, anything you wanted to pursue." "I already have everything I need," Sam replied. The crowdfunding campaign raised enough money to build and deploy irrigation systems for 100 communities. Dr. Walsh's foundation is already training local technicians in Guatemala, Kenya, and Honduras. The first installations are happening next month. The corporate representative on the call pressed harder. "But think about the scale we could achieve with our manufacturing and distribution capabilities. We could deploy your technology worldwide within 5 years." Sam was quiet for a long moment, thinking about Old Blue's lessons on dignity and worth. "At what cost?" he finally asked. "Would the communities that need this technology most be able to afford it? Would you prioritize profit margins over people who are dying from lack of clean water?" The silence on the other end of the call was telling. "I thought so," Sam said. "Thank you for the offer. But I'm committed to the path we've already chosen. This technology belongs to the people who need it, not to shareholders who want to profit from human suffering." After the call ended, Mr. Ben sat quietly for several minutes, studying Sam's face. "You just turned down enough money to buy and sell small countries," he said finally. "Are you sure you won't regret this decision?" Sam looked out the window at the oak tree, where Old Blue rested, where a small sapling was already showing its first green shoots. Old Blue lived his entire life being told he was worthless, Sam said. But he knew something the rest of the world didn't worth isn't measured in dollars or what others think of you. It's measured in the love you give and the lives you touch. He turned back to Mr. Ben with a smile that held all the wisdom of his difficult journey. I'd rather be poor and know that Maria Santos has clean water than be rich, and know that I chose money over mercy. Some things are more valuable than money, and the peace of keeping my promises to Mama and Old Blue is one of them. That evening, Sam received a video message that made his decision feel like the most natural thing in the world. It was from Maria Santos, standing beside a newly installed irrigation system in her Guatemalan village. "Angel engineer," she said in accented English, her face beaming with joy. "Look what you built for us. Now I can go to school every day, and my little brother doesn't get sick from bad water anymore. My grandmother says you have the heart of a saint. Thank you for remembering us." The video showed the entire village celebrating around the irrigation system. Children playing in clean water for the first time in their lives. Farmers tending crops that were already showing signs of unprecedented health and growth. This was what $200 million looked like when it was spent on compassion instead of accumulation. This was what Old Blue's lessons about dignity and worth looked like when they were translated into action. Sam saved the video to his phone and watched it 3 more times before bed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to choose between profit and purpose, new tests of the values that Old Blue and his mother had instilled in him. But tonight, he was content to know that somewhere in Guatemala, an 8-year-old girl was going to bed with a full stomach and the promise of clean water tomorrow. That was worth more than all the money in the world, and no amount of corporate pressure could convince him otherwise. The boy who had once been worthless in the world's eyes had learned to see worth where others saw only opportunity for exploitation. He had become the person Old Blue always knew he could be, someone who understood that the greatest wealth comes not from what you accumulate, but from what you give away. The revolution was no longer about one boy's journey from poverty to possibility. It had become something larger, more profound, more lasting. It had become a movement of people who chose to measure success by how many lives they improved, rather than how much money they made. And at the center of it all was a teenager who had learned the most important lesson of all, that the purpose of great gifts is not to make their possessor great, but to make the world greater through their generous use. The unexpected turning point had arrived, but it wasn't what anyone had anticipated. Instead of being corrupted by success, Sam had been refined by it, becoming more committed to his values rather than less. The boy who had survived abandonment, homelessness, and hunger had now survived something potentially more dangerous, the temptation of easy wealth. He had chosen the harder path, the one that led to true greatness rather than mere riches. And as he drifted off to sleep with Maria's laughter echoing in his mind, Sam knew that Old Blue would have been proud of the man he was becoming. The revolution continued, one village at a time, one child at a time, one choice at a time. And Sam intended to keep choosing compassion over comfort, purpose over profit, love over lucre, for as long as he drew breath. After all, he had promises to keep, and a legacy to honor, and a world to change. What more could any person ask for than the opportunity to leave the world better than they found it? The answer was simple: nothing at all. And that realization was the most revolutionary discovery of Sam's entire journey. The first field installation in Guatemala was scheduled for January, but Sam's life took an unexpected turn when Dr. Walsh called with an urgent request in early December. "We've had a crisis in Honduras," she explained during their video conference. "Hurricane Elena destroyed the water infrastructure in 3 mountain villages. People are drinking from contaminated streams, and we're already seeing cases of cholera. The government is overwhelmed, and traditional relief organizations can't get heavy equipment to those remote locations." Sam studied the satellite images Dr. Walsh shared on his screen. The villages were accessible only by narrow mountain paths, making it impossible to transport conventional irrigation and water purification systems. "How many people are affected?" he asked. "About 1,500, mostly women and children. The men have left to find work in the cities, leaving families without the physical strength to carry water from distant safe sources." Sam felt a familiar tightness in his chest, the same feeling he'd experienced as a child watching his mother struggle with something beyond her control. What do you need from me? Your irrigation system was designed to be modular and lightweight. If we can adapt it for rapid deployment in disaster scenarios, we might be able to get clean water flowing to these villages within weeks, instead of months. The challenge energized Sam in a way that corporate buyout offers never could. This wasn't about money or patents or business deals, this was about people dying while he had the power to help them. I'll leave for Honduras next week, Sam said without hesitation. Mr. Ben, who had been listening to the conversation, immediately objected. Sam, you're 14 years old. You can't just fly to a disaster zone in Central America. Why not? My system needs to be adapted for these conditions. And I'm the only person who understands every component well enough to make the necessary modifications. It's dangerous. The infrastructure is damaged. The political situation is unstable. And you have no experience with international humanitarian work. Sam's expression hardened with determination that reminded Mr. Ben of the starving boy who had collapsed outside his gate, desperate circumstances demanding desperate measures. 5 years ago, I was sleeping under bridges and drinking rainwater from puddles, Sam said quietly. I think I can handle a few weeks helping people who are facing similar challenges. The argument continued for days, with Dr. Hendricks and Mrs. Rodriguez joining Mr. Ben in urging caution. But Sam's resolve only strengthened when he received a message from Dr. Walsh, showing him photographs of children in the affected villages, hollow-eyed and listless. The same look Sam remembered seeing in mirrors during his worst days on the streets. They need me, he told Mr. Ben on the night before his scheduled departure. Not my money, not my technology, me, because I understand what it feels like to be desperate for clean water, to watch people walk past your suffering without stopping to help. Mr. Ben sat quietly for a long moment, studying the young man Sam had become. Your mother would be terrified and proud in equal measure, he said finally. Terrified because of the risks you're taking, proud because you're taking them for the right reasons. Will you trust me to do this, Mr. Ben smiled sadly. I trusted you the day I found you collapsed outside my gate. I won't stop trusting you now, even when it scares me. The flight to Tegucigalpa was Sam's first time leaving the United States, and the contrast with his comfortable life at the estate was immediately apparent. The airport was crowded and chaotic, the air thick with humidity and diesel fumes. But Sam felt energized rather than overwhelmed. This was real, urgent, meaningful work. Dr. Walsh met him at the airport with a team of engineers and humanitarian workers who would be supporting the emergency installation. The group included Maria Rodriguez, no relation to Mrs. Rodriguez from the estate, a Honduran engineer who had grown up in the affected region and understood both the technical challenges and cultural sensitivities they would face. The communities are skeptical, Maria explained as they drove through the damaged capital city toward the mountains. They've been promised help before that never came, or came with strings attached that made things worse. Sam nodded, remembering his own wariness toward adults who claimed they wanted to help him. How do we earn their trust? By listening more than we talk, by working alongside them instead of just for them, and by delivering exactly what we promise without hidden agendas. The mountain roads were treacherous, made worse by hurricane damage that had washed out bridges and triggered landslides. It took 2 days to reach the first village, traveling in four-wheel drive vehicles loaded with equipment and supplies. The village of San Miguel was a collection of simple houses built into the mountainside, connected by steep paths that became muddy rivers during the frequent tropical downpours. The hurricane had destroyed their traditional water source, a series of bamboo pipes that channeled mountain spring water to a central collection point. Sam's first meeting with the village leaders was conducted under a tarp, stretched between damaged trees, with translation help from Maria Rodriguez. The village elder, a weathered man named Carlos Mendoza, studied Sam with undisguised skepticism. You're very young, Carlos said through Maria's translation, and very far from home. Why should we trust that you understand our problems? Sam had prepared for this question during the long flight and drive. Because I know what it's like to be thirsty, he replied simply. I know what it's like to have adults make promises they don't keep, and I know what it's like to be helped by someone who saw my worth when nobody else did. He told them about his years on the streets, about Old Blue and Mr. Ben, about his mother's dream of using knowledge to serve love rather than profit. As Maria translated his words, Sam watched the faces of the villagers change from suspicion to understanding. This technology, Carlos said, it will cost us money we don't have. No cost to you, Sam assured him. The only thing I ask is that if our system works here, you help us teach other communities how to build and maintain their own. The installation process took 3 weeks and tested every assumption Sam had made about his technology. The modular design worked perfectly for transport, with components light enough to be carried by hand up narrow mountain paths. But the challenging terrain required innovations he hadn't anticipated. Working 12-hour days alongside the villagers, Sam learned to adapt his system to rocky soil, irregular water pressure, and weather patterns unlike anything he'd experienced in Chicago. The villagers taught him traditional engineering techniques that were perfectly suited to local conditions, while he shared modern improvements that increased efficiency and reliability. "Your technology is good," Carlos told him one evening as they tested the first operational section, "but your willingness to learn from us is better. Many outsiders come here thinking they know everything. You came here knowing you had much to learn." The breakthrough came when 10-year-old Elena Mendoza, Carlos's granddaughter, suggested a modification that none of the adults had considered. Watching the system struggle with the steep terrain, she pointed out that traditional terraced farming in the region used gravity in ways that could be incorporated into the irrigation design. "If we build like our ancestors built," she said through Maria's translation, "the water will want to flow where we need it instead of fighting us." Sam spent the next day working with Elena and several other village children to redesign key components based on traditional agricultural principles. The result was a hybrid system that combined his modern engineering with centuries of accumulated local wisdom. When the modified system came online, the improvement was dramatic. Water flowed smoothly and efficiently to every section of the village's agricultural area, with backup systems that could function even during power outages or equipment failures. But the real test came when neighboring villages sent delegations to see the installation. Sam watched nervously as engineers and farmers from other communities examined every component, asked detailed questions about maintenance requirements, and tested the system under various conditions. "Will you help us build one for our village?" asked the delegation leader from Las Flores, a community 2 valleys over. "We'll help you build your own," Sam replied. "This technology belongs to everyone who needs it." The next month became a whirlwind of training workshops, community installations, and cultural exchange that transformed Sam's understanding of both engineering and humanitarian work. He learned that sustainable technology wasn't just about technical specifications, it was about creating systems that communities could understand, maintain, and improve using local resources and knowledge. Working with children like Elena Mendoza reminded Sam of his own childhood collaboration with his mother. These young people had insights that formal education couldn't provide, born from daily interaction with their environment and unencumbered by assumptions about what was or wasn't possible. "They're natural engineers," Sam told Dr. Walsh during one of their regular video calls. "They see solutions that we miss because we're thinking too much about textbook theories instead of real-world conditions." "How has this changed your perspective on the technology?" Dr. Walsh asked. Sam looked out at the mountains where lights from newly installed irrigation systems twinkled like stars. "I realized that I didn't invent this system. I discovered principles that were already there, waiting to be understood." The real innovation is happening now, as these communities adapt and improve the basic design to meet their specific needs. By the time Sam prepared to return to Chicago, 7 villages had operational water systems, and 3 more were under construction. Local technicians had been trained to maintain and repair the equipment, and a network of community leaders was sharing knowledge and improvements across the region. The farewell ceremony in San Miguel was both joyful and emotional. Elena Mendoza presented Sam with a hand-carved wooden model of the irrigation system, incorporating design elements from both his original concept and the local innovations they had developed together. "This is for you to remember us," she said through Maria's translation, "and for us to remember that the best technology comes from the best hearts." Carlos Mendoza's final words to Sam carried a weight that the teenager would carry with him for the rest of his life. "You came here as a teacher, but you learned more than you taught. That is the mark of true wisdom." As the plane lifted off from Tegucigalpa, Sam reflected on how profoundly the experience had changed him. He had arrived in Honduras as a gifted inventor with a revolutionary technology. He was returning as something more complex and valuable, a bridge between different ways of understanding the world, a translator between modern engineering and traditional wisdom. The message from Maria Santos was waiting when he arrived at the estate. Her village's irrigation system had been operational for 2 months now, and the changes were remarkable. School attendance was up because children no longer needed to spend hours collecting water. Crop yields had increased dramatically, providing both better nutrition and surplus food to sell at market. Most importantly, there had been no cases of waterborne illness since the system came online. Angel Engineer, Maria's video message began. My teacher says I should tell you that you have given us more than clean water. You have given us time to learn, time to play, time to dream about the future, instead of just surviving today. Sam saved the video and watched it 3 more times before bed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, as news of the Honduras success spread and requests for installations poured in from around the world. He would need to train more teams, adapt the technology for different climates and cultures, and figure out how to scale their humanitarian model without losing the personal connections that made it so effective. But tonight, he was content to know that Elena Mendoza was falling asleep with clean water flowing outside her window, that Maria Santos was planning her education instead of her next water collection trip, and that old blues lessons about dignity and worth were rippling outward through communities he would never see. The boy, who had once been invisible, was now illuminating the lives of people around the world. But more importantly, he had learned that true leadership wasn't about having all the answers, it was about asking the right questions and being humble enough to learn from the people you were trying to help. Have you ever experienced a moment when helping others changed you more than it changed them? Have you ever discovered that your greatest strength came not from what you knew, but from what you were willing to learn from others? Share your thoughts in the comments, because sometimes the most important conversations happen when we admit that we're all teachers and students at the same time. The revolution that had started with one boy's secret was becoming something larger and more beautiful than Sam had ever imagined. It was becoming a movement of mutual learning, shared wisdom, and collective hope that transcended borders, languages, and cultures. And at the center of it all was a teenager who had learned the most important lesson of his young life: that the purpose of great knowledge is not to make its possessor feel superior, but to create connections that make everyone wiser, stronger, and more compassionate. The work was far from over, but Sam had never been more ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. After all, he now had a global family of engineers, farmers, children, and dreamers who shared his vision of a world where access to clean water was a right, not a privilege. The boy who had survived the streets was now helping entire communities thrive, and the most remarkable part was that he was just getting started. The future had never looked brighter, and Sam intended to make sure that brightness reached every dark corner of the world, where children were still waiting for someone to see their worth and give them hope. The revolution continued, one village at a time, one child at a time, one lesson at a time. And Sam had learned that the most powerful technology of all was the technology of human connection, the ability to see beyond differences and find the common ground where miracles become possible. That was a lesson Old Blue would have understood perfectly, and one that would guide Sam through whatever adventures lay ahead. The boy who had been saved by kindness was now saving others with the same gift, multiplied by innovation, persistence, and an unshakable belief that everyone deserves a chance at a better tomorrow. The question was no longer whether Sam's technology could change the world. It was whether the world was ready to be changed by a teenager who refused to accept that some problems were too big to solve or some people too forgotten to help. The answer, as Elena Mendoza and Maria Santos and countless others could attest, was a resounding yes. The world was ready, and Sam was just the person to help it get there. Sam's return to the Whitmore estate in February brought with it a new challenge that no amount of engineering brilliance could solve. The success in Honduras had generated global attention, and suddenly everyone wanted a piece of his technology and his time. The estate's phone rang constantly with requests from governments, NGOs, corporations, and individual communities. Each caller had urgent needs and compelling stories, but Sam quickly realized that saying yes to everyone meant helping no one effectively. We've received over 300 formal requests for installations, Dr. Walsh reported during their weekly planning meeting. That doesn't include the informal appeals from individuals, community groups, and smaller organizations. Sam stared at the map Dr. Walsh had spread across Mr. Ben's dining room table. Red pins marked locations of urgent need drought-stricken regions in Africa, flood-damaged areas in Southeast Asia, impoverished communities throughout Central and South America. Each pin represented thousands of people who needed what Sam could provide. How do we choose? Sam asked, the weight of impossible decisions settling on his shoulders like a familiar burden. We can't save everyone, Dr. Walsh said gently, but we can create a model that allows communities to save themselves. The key is building sustainable programs that can be replicated without requiring your direct involvement in every installation. The solution they developed was both pragmatic and revolutionary. Instead of trying to respond to individual requests, Sam and Dr. Walsh's team would establish regional training centers where local engineers and community leaders could learn to build, install, and maintain the irrigation systems themselves. Sam leaned over the chalk-dusted dining room table, tracing his finger along the map of regional training centers they'd sketched out together. Each marker represented a new hub of possibility. In Nairobi, in Lima, in Jakarta, and in dozens more spots determined by local need and logistical feasibility. The model was ambitious, but after the successes in Guatemala and Honduras, it felt not only necessary, but entirely within reach. Dr. Walsh folded the map and slid it back across the table. We'll need partnerships with local universities, NGOs, municipal governments, anybody who can provide sustainable support once our team moves on. Sam nodded, thinking of all the villagers who had embraced ownership of the irrigation systems he'd helped install, the Honduran families who proved that an outsider's technology could thrive if it was adapted collaboratively, the Guatemalan children who whispered, "Angel Engineer," as the water flowed clean and steady. He wanted that same feeling of shared triumph to ripple outward, beyond even his capacity to oversee. He met Mr. Ben's eye. The older man stood in the doorway, arms folded, watching the map as though it were both a promise and a test. "You've been quiet," Mr. Ben observed gently. "What's on your mind?" "Just thinking about scale," Sam admitted. "I can personally supervise maybe 10 installations a year if I push myself. But 10 lanterns won't carry the light across the globe. If we can train local teams, really train them, the work can multiply 1,000-fold. "That's exactly it," Mr. Ben said, stepping forward to examine the map. "And once those centers are up and running, they'll become hubs of innovation in their own right. They'll solve problems we haven't even anticipated." A tremor of excitement fluttered in Sam's chest. Imagine a community in the Sahel region, pulling together to adapt this system for sandstorms and scarce resources. Imagine a mountain village in Nepal, where the technology solves both drought and flood problems, because it's modified by people who know the land better than any model we could design. Dr. Walsh smiled. "We'll need to draft a curriculum: engineering basics, maintenance protocols, community engagement. And we'll need to secure seed funding for each center. And volunteers," Sam added, "to travel and train, at least at first. People who understand that our goal is not to build a dependency, but to build autonomy." Over the next weeks, the estate turned into a hive of activity. Engineers, development experts, and students arrived from around the world, eager to be part of the movement. The old horse stables were converted into a makeshift workshop and lecture hall, complete with soldering stations and whiteboards. Mrs. Rodriguez baked more bread than ever before to feed the growing team, and the staff quarters, once crowded by the handful of animal caretakers, now bustled with youthful energy and the hum of conversation in half a dozen languages. Sam found himself in almost constant meetings, designing training modules, negotiating memorandums of understanding with foreign universities, coordinating shipping logistics for prototype kits. At night, he walked the pastures, breathing in the cool air and the faint scent of hay, still carrying the weight of his mother's dreams and Old Blue's gentle spirit. One evening, a week before the first cohort of trainees was scheduled to arrive, Sam sat alone in the old hayloft, reviewing the final draft of the curriculum. The low wooden beams above him were streaked with memory-soft horses, headed of Old Blue's monumental presence, of the countless nights spent thinking beside that same oak tree. He pulled in a deep breath. This was the culmination of everything he'd learned. The compassion of Mr. Ben, the medical discipline of Dr. Hendricks, the technical rigor of Dr. Morrison, the wisdom of villagers like Carlos and Elena. And most of all, the unshakable conviction that no child, no community, was ever beyond hope. The next morning, the horizon was rimmed with sunlight as vans arrived carrying the first 40 trainees. They spilled out onto the circular drive, rolling suitcases in one hand, notebooks in the other, faces bright with anticipation and a touch of apprehension. Sam greeted them alongside Dr. Walsh. He offered each a handshake or a hug, gestures he'd learned could bridge cultural divides as effectively as any lesson plan. In the coming weeks, Sam addressed the group beneath the open sky. You'll learn not only how this technology works, but why it matters. You'll learn to adapt it to your home environments. You'll learn to teach others, and you'll leave here ready to build training centers that will outlive any one of us. Uproarious applause followed, mingled with cheers in dozens of accents. And then the real work began. Days bled into nights as they drilled on pump mechanics, sensor calibration, solar power optimization, and troubleshooting protocols. Sam took time each evening to walk the trainees through the pastures to Old Blue's burial site. Beneath the sapling, he told them the story of the bull who taught him about dignity, of the boy who refused to let suffering define him. He spoke candidly about the threats they'd faced from men like Blackwood, the predatory investors who had tried to exploit his youth and generosity for profit. True partnership, Sam said softly, means giving people the tools to build their own future and the respect to let them do it their way. The trainees listened, riveted by this personal history woven into the technical lessons. They asked questions, took notes, and shared their own stories of adversity and resilience. By the end of the 4th week, the trainees had worked in small teams to assemble complete systems, tested them in simulated field conditions, and presented detailed proposals for adapting the technology to specific regions. Sam watched with pride as a group from Kenya demonstrated a filtration module that doubled the system's effectiveness in sandy soils. He marveled at the Nepalese trainees' adaptation for steep terraced farms, and the Pacific Islanders' solar-powered flotation pumps for coastal atolls. On the final evening, under the same stars he had once shared with Old Blue, Sam hosted a celebration. The workshop was transformed into a banquet hall, lanterns strung between beams, tables laden with food from around the world: curries, empanadas, dumplings, roasted root vegetables, fresh fruit. Laughter and music filled the space as trainees taught Sam folk songs from their homelands, and Sam shared Brazilian Portuguese phrases he'd picked up in his childhood. Mr. Ben, leaning on his cane, watched the scene with a gentle smile. "Look at them," he said to Sam. "Each of them carries a spark. Imagine the fires they'll light." Sam slipped beside him. "It's better than I ever dreamed." He paused, fingers brushing the sapling in the Cornera living tribute to Old Blue's legacy. "Thank you for everything." Mr. Ben placed a hand on his shoulder. "No, thank you for refusing to give up on yourself, and for giving everyone else that same chance." The next morning dawned bright and hopeful as the trainees prepared to depart for their home countries. Trucks and vans rolled up to the barn doors, loaded with crates of equipment and spare parts, instruction manuals translated into multiple languages, and embroidered kits bearing the movement's emblem. A pair of hands cupping a water droplet. Sam and Dr. Walsh oversaw the loading, checking off manifests, and exchanging hugs with the departing teams. One by one, the vehicles rumbled down the gravel drive, heading toward airports, border crossings, and miles of road that would carry them to hundreds of villages in need. When the last van departed, Sam stood alone in the workshop, breathing in the quiet. The benches and boards and tools lay scattered like witnesses to the work that had just taken place. He ran his hand along a bench, feeling the dents and scratches as marks of progress. It would be months before the first reports arrived: videos of fields turning green in Niger, testimonials from families in rural India, photos of smiling children in Brazil turning on taps for the first time. But even as he waited for the news, Sam felt the movement pulsing through him. The revolution had moved beyond the limits of Whitmore Estate. It was now a network of relationships, knowledge, and shared resolve. Back at the mansion, life settled into a new rhythm. The stables-turned-workshop sat quiet, except for occasional crate inspections and prototype improvements. The barn was once again home to horses, and the sheep grazed in fields that carried water by gravity-fed channels, designed by Sam's trainees. The staff quarters buzzed with plans for the next training cycle. Sam spent his days in meetings with Dr. Walsh and Mr. Ben, reviewing the first data from Guatemala and Honduras. He worked on grant proposals and oversaw improvements to the curriculum. He carved out time to mentor Mrs. Rodriguez's grandchildren, teaching them basic engineering principles as they sat under the oak tree tradition that reminded him of the boy he once was. One crisp morning, an envelope arrived bearing the seal of the United Nations. Inside was an invitation for Sam to address the General Assembly to speak on global water security and community-driven solutions. The honor was staggering, and his heart pounded as he imagined himself before the world's leaders. "Are you going to accept?" Mr. Ben asked over breakfast, eyes alight with pride. Sam traced the edge of the letter. "I think I should. Not for me, but for the people who need to know that this model works. Ordinary people working together can solve extraordinary problems." Later that week, Sam prepared his speech. He wrote about the girl in Guatemala who walked 2 hours for water, about the elderly bull who showed him the power of compassion and dignity, about the trainees who had turned a simple prototype into a global movement. He practiced in front of Dr. Hendricks, who coached him on delivery, and in front of Jake, who reminded him to speak plainly. People remembered stories far more than statistics. When the day arrived, Sam stood at the podium in the Grand General Assembly Hall, sunlight filtering through the tall windows. Delegates from nearly 200 countries sat before him, some curious, some skeptical. He took a deep breath. "My name is Sam," he began, and the room fell silent. He spoke of abandonment and hunger, of kindness offered at a mansion gate, of an old bull whose friendship taught him worth. He spoke of technology not as a commodity, but as a language of connection and invitation to co-create a better future. He shared images of fields revived, of children in clean water, and of the trainees who carried the movement forward. When he finished, there was a moment of stillness, and then applause that echoed through the halls. Tears shone in some eyes, smiles spread in others. Sam felt something shift in the room, collective belief that solutions could come from unexpected places, that a 13-year-old who once had nothing could become a beacon of hope for billions. Back in Chicago, the Whitmore estate received a wave of new interest offers to fund additional training centers, invitations to international conferences, collaborations with academic institutions. But through it all, Sam and his team held fast to their guiding principle. Every partnership must honor the autonomy and dignity of the communities they served. Years passed. The training centers flourished, each hub adapting the technology to local challenges. Drought-resistant crop irrigation in sub-Saharan Africa, rainwater harvesting in Pacific Islands, flood prevention systems in Southeast Asia. The movement's emblem, 2 hands, cradling a water droplet, became a symbol of empowerment rather than charity. Sam grew from a boy into a leader whose first lessons were learned hunger and loneliness. He never forgot the feeling of being invisible, nor the power of a single act of kindness. As he traveled between continents, sometimes in private planes, sometimes in crowded minibus, he carried with him the memory of Old Blue's patient eyes, his mother's unwavering faith, and Mr. Ben's simple belief that every life was worth saving. On his 20th birthday, Sam returned to the Whitmore estate to find the oak tree flourishing into a young grove of saplings, marking each year since Old Blue's passing. Under their branches, a plaque read, "In honor of Old Blue, friend to the forgotten, and Sam, who dared to believe in second chances." Sam knelt and touched the plaque, feeling tears prick his eyes. He thought of all the lives changed, the friendships forged, the dignity restored. He had started with a secret buried in the dirt, a child's designs, hidden from a world that had plenty of excuses not to care. He had ended with a global community united by shared purpose, proving that even the smallest spark can ignite a fire that warms the world. The journey was far from over, but at that moment, Sam understood that the real legacy of any great invention was not patents or profits. It was the lives uplifted, the voices empowered, and the simple truth that every person has worth, no matter how invisible they might seem. He rose and walked through the grove, sunlight dancing on the leaves, and imagined what the next 20 years would bring. New challenges, no doubt climate crises, political turmoil, unforeseen obstacles. But he was ready, for he knew that as long as there were hearts willing to care, minds willing to learn, and hands willing to build, There would always be hope. Sam paused at the edge of the grove, looking out over the pastures that had once been his sanctuary, and now were the birthplace of a global revolution. He took a deep breath and whispered, "Thank you. To the memory of every teacher, every friend, every animal who had believed in him when he couldn't believe in himself." Then he turned and walked back toward the mansion, ready to continue the work that had become his life's purpose, one community at a time, one drop of water at a time.